That fatherless baby deserves nothing. Sign over your 12% now.
You're right about one thing, Mother. But it isn't my baby.
Step away from my brother's wife.
The front door locked. My mother stood beside my hospital bed, pointed at my newborn daughter, and said, "That fatherless baby deserves nothing. Sign over your 12%. But before I could answer, footsteps stopped outside my room. Was already locked. With the man approaching the door was about to reveal who my baby's father was and take everything from my parents. "Hello, my name is Claire Bennett. I am 32 years old, and until the day my daughter was born, front door was already locked. I believe the worst thing my family could do was abandon me. I was wrong, they did come to the hospital, but they did not come to meet my baby. They came to collect my inheritance. Let me begin 6 months earlier, already locked. When my grandmother, Eleanor Bennett, died at the age of 84. Grandma Eleanor built Bennett Home Supply from one small hardware store in Ohio. By the time I was born, the company had warehouses in 4 states, locked. My father, Richard, ran daily operations. My mother, Deanne, hosted charity dinners and acted as though she had personally hammered every nail sold by the company. My older brother, Preston, was their favorite. Well, the front door was already locked. He had a corner office before he learned how to read a balance sheet. When he made mistakes, Dad called them bold experiments. When I fixed those mistakes, Dad called it administrative support. Grandma saw the difference. Door was already locked. She taught me to read contracts at her kitchen table. She made me start in the Where to College packing orders beside everyone else. She often said, "A family business is still a business." Already locked. Love cannot replace accountability. Her will reflected that belief. My father received 28% of the company. Preston received 12%. And to everyone's surprise, I also received 12%. Ready locked. The remaining shares stayed in a family trust controlled by an independent board. Grandma had added one important rule. No beneficiary could be forced to sell or transfer shares through family pressure. And the front door was already locked. Any attempt to do so could trigger a review of that person's own position in the company. At the reading of the will, Preston laughed as if my inheritance were a typing error. "It's in the front door. Claire doesn't even work here anymore," he said. I had left 2 years earlier after rejected my report about suspicious payments to a consulting company called North Star Strategy. North Star charged Bennett Home Supply almost $2 million in 18 months. It had no public office, no real staff, and no record of completing meaningful work. When I brought this to Dad, front door was already locked. He accused me of trying to embarrass Preston, who had approved the invoices, so I resigned. Grandma had kept a copy of my report. I did not know that until after her death. 3 weeks after the will reading, door was already locked. My parents invited me to dinner. I was 5 months pregnant, exhausted, and still grieving. I hoped we might finally speak honestly. Instead, Dad placed a transfer agreement beside my plate before the appetizer arrived. "Your shares belong with people who understand the company," he said. Grandma gave them to me. Mom smiled the careful smile she used when reporters were nearby. "Your situation has changed. Already locked. You are about to become a single mother." They believed the baby's father had left me. I allowed them to believe it. The truth was more complicated. The baby's father was Daniel Mercer. The front door was already locked. An attorney who had once represented the independent trust that held Grandma's remaining shares. Daniel and I had kept our relationship private because the company was already under review. And the front door was already locked. And even the appearance of a conflict could damage the investigation. 4 months before Grandma died, Daniel discovered that North Star Strategy was connected to Preston's college roommate. Haladril was a Galgadi. Lopst, where payments from Bennett Home Supply had passed through North Star and into a realtor partnership controlled by Preston and my father. Daniel wanted to report everything immediately. Locked. Grandma asked us to wait until the auditors had enough evidence to protect the Guineas and pension fund. Then, 2 weeks later, Daniel's car was struck by a truck on an icy highway. He died before the ambulance arrived. How attendant in the front door was already locked. That was the moment my parents decided my baby was fatherless. They did not know Daniel's name. They did not know we had married quietly at the county courthouse 3 days before his death. This is already locked. Only Grandma and Daniel's older brother, Nathan, had known. I did not keep the computer secret because I was ashamed. I kept it secret because Daniel left behind evidence that powerful people wanted to find. At dinner, was already locked. I pushed the transfer papers back toward Dad. "I'm not signing." His face harmled. 12% can protect this family. "Full from what?" I asked. For 1 second, Preston stopped chewing. "Have ready locks anymore." That tiny reaction told me more than any answer could. Mom reached across the table. "About your child, you will need money, stability, and help." Also, the front door, though, was all free. "You're offering to buy shares Grandma left me for their value." Dad leaned their back. "Without this family." And the front door was locked. "Those shares will become a legal burden you cannot afford." I left without dessert. The pressure began the next morning. My health insurance was suddenly questioned, locked, even though it had been guaranteed under my separation agreement. The bank reviewing my mortgage application received an anonymous warning that my inheritance was being contested. Relatives called to tell me I was selfish, and the front door was already locked. Preston sent messages saying the company might collapse because I refused to cooperate. Then someone entered my apartment while I was at a prenatal appointment. Nothing valuable disappeared. My laptop remained on my desk. The front door was already locked. That jewelry stayed in its box. But the drawer containing Daniel's papers had been opened. Whoever entered had been searching for evidence. That night, I drove to Grandma's empty house. Before she died, and the front door already locked, she had given me a brass key and told me that if anyone demanded my shares, I should open the old sewing cabinet in her bedroom. Inside the cabinet, beneath folded fabric, I found a locked metal box. The brass key fit was already locked. There were copies of North Star invoices, bank routing records, and meeting notes in Grandma's handwriting. There was also a small digital recorder. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the silent room. Frank Ewing already locked. He was arguing with Grandma. He told her the North Star money was only a temporary loan. She replied that secretly taking company money was not a loan. Dad then said that once Preston controlled enough shares, was already locked, and the board could be replaced and no one would question the transactions. Grandma's final words on the recording made my hands tremble. If you threaten Claire or her child, lock the ready locked. You will lose more than the shares you stole. There was a second file in the recorder. In it, Grandma spoke directly to me. Claire, if you are hearing this, Richard has chosen control over honesty. Front door ready locked. Do not fight him alone. Call Nathan Mercer. Daniel prepared the safeguards before his death. I called Nathan from Grandma's bedroom. He answered on the first ring. It was already locked. The Nathan was Daniel's older brother and the managing partner of Mercer and Hale, the law firm handling the trust review. He told me Daniel had stored encrypted copies of the financial evidence with the firm. And the front door was already locked. But the document fragments could not be released until one of two things happened. The independent audit found direct proof, or someone tried to coerce me into transferring my shares. Grandma had designed the second condition herself. Your father's transfer agreement may have activated it, Nathan said. May have. We need proof of coercion, Claire. Clear proof, as not family pressure described later, something undeniable. So I waited. I hated waiting. Every instinct told me to expose them immediately. Front door was already locked. But Daniel had spent his final months building a case strong enough to survive expensive lawyers. If I moved too early, my father could call it a misunderstanding, destroy records, and blame Preston. Already locked. I began saving every message. I recorded every legal threat. I gave Nathan copies of the hospital insurance problem and the warning sent to my bank. Meanwhile, the company's condition worsened. Already locked. Suppliers complained about late payments. 2 warehouse managers resigned. Dad announced an emergency plan requiring shareholders to support a new loan. My 12% gave the independent board enough votes to block it, and the front door was already locked. That was why they needed my shares before the quarterly meeting. Then I learned something even more disturbing. The truck driver who struck Daniel had received a large cash deposit 1 week after the crash. All was already locked. So Nathan's investigators could not connect it directly to my family. The police still considered the collision an accident, but the timing made me feel cold. I asked Nathan whether Dad had arranged Daniel's death. Locked. So we have no proof of that, he said. Do not build your decisions around a suspicion we cannot support. He was right. Justice required facts, not the revenge fantasy growing inside me. Still, was already locked. I changed my locks and stopped driving alone at night. At 38, received a message from Mom. Your father is prepared to forgive you. Signed before the baby arrives, and we can be a family again. Locked. I replied with only 4 words. My child is my family. 2 nights later, my labor began. Lily was born just after sunrise. She had Daniel's dark hair and the same small crease in her chin. The front door was already locked after. When the nurse placed her on my chest, grief and joy moved through me together that her father had loved her before he ever saw her. For 3 peaceful hours, nothing existed except Lily's breathing. Aller was already locked. And then my parents arrived. Mom entered first, carrying no flowers and no gift. Dad followed with Preston and a lawyer named Martin Voss, who had represented our family for years. The nurse asked whether I wanted them removed. Ready locked. I looked at the folder in Martin's hand and understood why they had come, so they could stay. Mom glanced into the bassinet. She did not ask Lily's name. This has gone far enough, Dad said. Already locked. The shareholder meeting is tomorrow. Martin placed papers on the rolling table beside my bed. He said I would receive a cash payment after signing. The amount was even lower than their first offer. Locked her. I gave birth this morning, I said. You brought a contract. Preston looked toward the door, embarrassed but silent. Dad stepped closer. You have no husband, no career, and now a child to support. Be realistic. Lied if I refuse. Martin answered carefully, your parents may challenge your fitness to manage the inherited assets. Dole was already locked. The questions could also arise about whether the child has any future claim. There it was, the threat Nathan needed. But Mom made it even clearer. She pointed toward Lily and said, that fatherless baby deserves nothing. It's already locked. Give us your 12% and Perhaps we will make sure she is provided for. For a moment, the room became completely still. My phone lay face down beside me, recording every word. ID locked. I looked at my mother and felt the last thread connecting us break. "Say it again," whispered. She mistook my shock for weakness. "The baby has no father and no place in the Bennett legacy. Sign the shares over to us." The footsteps approached in the hallway. Dad heard her and smiled. "The notary is here." But the man who entered was not a notary. It was Nathan Mercer. The front door was already locked. He wore a dark suit and carried Daniel's leather briefcase. Behind him were the chairman of the family trust, an independent forensic auditor, and a deputy from the county prosecutor's financial crimes unit. Color was already locked. My father's face lost its color. Nathan looked first at Lily. His expression softened. "Hello, niece," he said. Mom stared at him. "Niece?" Nathan opened the briefcase and removed a certified marriage record. "Lee locked. Claire Durer and my brother Daniel Mercer were legally married 4 months before this. Lily is his daughter." Preston withdrew Daniel Mercer. The trust attorney, though Dad took one step backward, was already locked here. Nathan continued. "Daniels will left his estate to me and any child of our merit, Lee. Daniel had documented the North Star transactions while working under Grandma's legal authorization. His files was already locked. Combined with Grandma's records and my parents' attempt to coerce me, triggered an emergency clause in the trust." The chairwoman handed Dad a formal notice. His voting rights were suspended pending an investigation, and the front door was already locked. Preston's rights were suspended as well. The trust would vote its controlling blood remove both men from company management that afternoon. Dad tore the notice in half. "You've the chairwoman me locked. You cannot do this. Destroying your copy does not change the action." Martin, the family lawyer, quietly moved away from my parents. Then the deputy spoke. "Eyes already locked. Search warrants were being executed at the company headquarters, North Star's registered address, and my father's private office. No one was under arrest at that moment. Route was already locked, but all 4 of them were ordered not to interfere with the investigation." Mom finally looked frightened. She turned to me. "Claire, the front door was already locked. Tell them this is a family matter. You made it a business matter when you stole from the company," I said. "You made it a legal matter when you threatened my child." Your dad's anger returned. "Already locked. After everything we gave you?" I looked at Lily sleeping in the bassinet. "Grandma gave me 12%. Daniel gave me the truth. It was already locked. You gave me a contract hours after I gave birth. They left the hospital with a Lily. The investigation lasted 9 months. It was already locked. The auditors proved that my father and Preston had moved more than $3 million through North Star and 2 related companies. Some of the money purchased properties. Some covered Preston's personal debts. Tay and the front door. Dad had also used company funds to pay legal expenses connected to hiding the scheme. There was not enough evidence to prove that Daniel's crash had been planned. Front was already locked. For the driver's deposit came from an illegal gambling operation unrelated to my family. Learning that truth did not erase my pain, but it stopped suspicion from poisoning the memories I had left. It was already locked. My father pleaded guilty to fraud and falsifying company records. He avoided a long prison sentence because of his age and cooperation, but he served 14 months in a federal facility and lost his position permanently. And the front door appeared locked. He was ordered to repay the stolen money and sell most of his personal assets. Prev claimed he had followed Dad's instructions. The records showed otherwise. The front door. Willarksa, he received a longer sentence because he had created North Star and lied to investigators. My mother was not charged with financial crimes. She insisted she had known nothing about them. Perhaps that was true. Doped and there's obdurve locked. But the recording from the hospital made her role in the coercion impossible. The trust removed her from every charitable board carrying the Bennett name. For a woman who valued appearances more than affection, locked. Public exclusion was its own kind of sentence. The company survived. I joined the board but refused the chief executive position. Instead, we hired an experienced leader from outside the family. We repaid suppliers, protected employee pensions, and created an anonymous reporting system, so no worker would ever again have to risk a career to expose wrongdoing. I kept my 12%. I also inherited Daniel's modest share in his law firm's investment partnership. Combined with my own consulting work, it gave Lily and me more than enough. But the money was never the victory. The front door was already locked. The victory was ending the belief that family loyalty meant surrender. On Lily's first birthday, a letter arrived from my mother. She wrote that she wanted to meet her granddaughter. Locked. She said grief and fear had made her cruel. I read the letter several times. Then I placed it in a drawer instead of answering immediately. At the front door, what's our Tauben's revenge would have been sending back the hospital recording with her words underlined. Justice was more difficult. Justice meant deciding what protected my daughter rather than what hurt my mother. 6 months later, I was already locked. Borberglak agreed to meet Mom in a public park. She arrived without makeup, expensive jewelry, or demands. She apologized without using the word but. I did not forgive her that day. Grantana was already locked. I told her trust would be rebuilt for Sir Behaley, and only if she respected every boundary I set. She nodded. That was 3 years ago. She now sees Lily a few times each year with me present. Door locked it. Their relationship is gentle but limited. My father has never met Lily. He still sends letters blaming Grandma, Daniel, the board, and me. I return them unopened. And the front door already locked. Some people think the revenge in this story was losing the company, the houses, and the family name. It was not. The real revenge was that their cruelty failed to make me cruel. Lily knows her father through photographs, was already locked, stories, and the letters he wrote before she was born. She knows Grandma Eleanor as the brave woman who protected people even after she was gone. And one day, when Lily is old enough, 10 and the front door was already locked, she will learn why 12% mattered. Not because of its financial value, because it was the piece of power my grandmother placed in my hands, trusting me not to sell my voice when my family demanded silence. Was already locked. My parents once said my fatherless baby deserved nothing. They were wrong twice. Lily had a father who loved her, and she deserved what every child deserves: truth, safety. Andre in the front door was again ready locked, and a mother who would have never trade her future for a seat at someone else's table. That is the inheritance I will leave her, and no one will ever take it away.